Hey everybody, before I get started, I just want to mention a couple of ways that you can engage with me on a more personal level. I have a few avenues set up and I keep focusing on one, and I figured why don't I make a short little video talking about all of them real quick before we get into these episodes. So first thing, Patreon. There's a link in the episode description and every episode description to the Patreon, as well as a video on the feed called Major Announcement that has all the details of what each tier offers and how much they cost. I implore you to check that out. I offer a lot of cool shit for my patrons. Second thing, the Discord channel. There's also a Discord link in the episode description and in every episode description. I have multiple channels set up there for each show that I'm covering, and it's a great way to just engage with me. I have a channel set up for MMA talk as well. I'm a big MMA fan, so if you're an MMA fan, you can check that out as well. There's a link to the Discord in the episode description. And then lastly, the Facebook and Twitter. Social media. Follow me on there. I post news on there. When I say news, I mean like, hey, I'm stopping covering this show. Hey, I'm starting covering this show. Let me know what you think about this. I do live watches of things on Facebook where like I'll check in and say I'm watching so-and-so show, and then I'll like live comment while I'm watching it, and that'll be cool if maybe you watch that show too and you want to watch along with me, or you're watching it later and you will see my thoughts, which are usually pretty entertaining because I'm usually pretty high when I'm writing them. So check out all those links in each episode description, and let's talk about this episode. Peace.
One mic, one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. One mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about Season 2, Episode 8, Chapter 16, the Season 2 finale of HBO's Perry Mason. So, I thought this was a really great episode. There was a lot of interesting things I want to cover here, particularly the portion about the illusion of justice that they discuss here. This episode does a lot to not just tie up loose ends and wrap up this season, but it also, I think, does a nice little kind of like epilogue portion that I think can be looked at as not just a here's the beginning of the next chapter for these characters. It's also kind of like, to a greater degree, setting up a third season, which I think the show's likely to get. Like, season 1 I thought was really good, but I don't think a lot of people watched it, and they still did a second season. They brought in the people from the Nick. The show is, I think, from what I could tell, is a lot more popular. I don't know, not necessarily views-wise. I don't know how many people are watching it, but reviews-wise, it's doing a lot better. So I'd like to see a third season, and I feel like the little epilogue portion that's probably like about the final 20 minutes does a good job of setting up some stuff for season 3 that I could see being pretty compelling as well. So let's get into it. As usual, I'm going to break this down by character. We're going to be spending a lot of time, most of our time, with Perry. And I want to start by opening up with Perry. He opens the episode having a conversation over shoe shine with the judge. This conversation takes place 30 minutes before the judge is supposed to render a decision over how to respond to the whole gun situation. We find out that he was set to declare a mistrial, but Perry convinces him to let the trial continue by selling the judge on the idea that he's going to work harder for the boys than any court-appointed attorney would. And I was initially a bit bothered by the fact that I felt like I did a good job of reading that shoe shine conversation and reading between the lines and going, I bet Perry convinced the judge to change his mind here, only for the judge to later very directly say, I was going to declare a mistrial, but then I got my mind changed. I'm like, oh, now I don't feel as smart since you just put it out there. Now everybody knows. But I did like how the agreement was only known by Perry and the judge, so that when the judge says, Perry has to serve 4 months of jail, and Della's like, oh, that's a bit much, right? It explains why Perry just went along with it. Like, nope, that's perfect. Because in the conversation, Perry said, like, I think I should still be able to be on this case and the case should continue, but I do accept any kind of punishment that the court sees fit for me. So that's what it was. Perry and the crew then visit Phipps, and they essentially blackmail him into giving them the pics and negatives he has of Berger by saying they got enough evidence on him for him to go down for the killing of Brooks, and they got this Ozzie Jackson guy to testify, which calls back to a scene earlier in the episode where we see Ozzie and Paul talking. I said I plan on talking about that later in the Paul section, but I'm actually just going to speak on it briefly now. I like this scene because there is a level of realness to it that exists within the black community where that conversation felt like a conversation that could really happen. Where it's like, you would think like, oh shit, that guy beat the fuck out of me, run. Or, oh, that guy beat the fuck out of me, let me attack him or whatever. The way that conversation plays out is a lot more realistic than it looks, and I appreciated that. So I want to take a pause here to talk about the focus of the episode, which I think is the illusion of justice. There was a line delivered by Berger earlier in the season. I want to say it was like episode 1, actually. And it comes up a lot in this episode. Perry and Della talk at the end of the episode after everything's done over drinks about justice and how you can attain it. And she talks about all of the ethically questionable, that's what I'm going to call them, things they've done to get the results that they got. And Perry essentially seems to take the stance of, the system is corrupt and you can achieve justice, but you can only really achieve it if you're working within the laws and the rules of the system. And we see that in this episode. Blackmailing is very prevalent here. In order to counteract the blackmailing that Camila did that allowed Camila to do everything that she did, they have to do some blackmailing of their own. And we see that in this episode. It starts with Phipps. They blackmail him to get the negatives, obviously with the idea of like, hey, you can go down for the Brooks crime. And there are other examples of the team having to use blackmailing as a means to get what they want, which is, again, speaks to the conversation about justice. Speaking of Phipps, I've personally been a bit unclear on why he seems to have so much hate for Camila, but it comes through in a scene here where Camila kind of demeans Constance, who's Phipps' wife, the heroin addict, over her drug problem. And this causes Phipps to do Perry one better and deliver all of the photos that Camila is using to blackmail people. I say black people a lot, so that was just natural. That was like if that's like autocorrect correcting duck to fuck. It's like, oh, you say fuck all the time. This must have been what you meant. That's what just happened. When I said black people, that was me autocorrecting like a little bit too much. So side note, when our group is reviewing these photos, did we see a pic of Paul with another man? I feel like we saw that, and did we? It's been a long time since season 1. Did we know that, if that was Paul, did we know that he was bi? Because they've really, 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 really leaned into how much he loves his wife and how good they are together this season. So it'd be interesting if that was the case, especially since, obviously, Della also has a hiding my sexuality situation to deal with. Moving on, they give Berger all the pics of him, which he destroys. And in exchange, he offers a plea deal where one of the boys can go free if the other confesses to pulling the trigger on Brooks. And the one who confesses will not get death, but will get 30 years with no parole. The episode ends with Perry turning himself in for his jail stay. We see this entire process of him checking in. There's a interesting conversation with Pete when Pete walks him in. And I love when he says something like... Perry says something like he told him he was a lawyer or something like that, and he figured that would help him out while he's in jail. And Pete's like, don't do that. You're going to have everybody bugging you for questions, and that's how you got here. And Perry's like, no, you're how I got here. I'm like, oh, yeah, good call. But like I said, we see this entire process, Pete walking him in, him giving up all his stuff, changing it to his jail clothes, all that good stuff. Good stuff. Habit. All of that very, very, very bad stuff that goes along with having to go through this process. And we see Perry use a piece of gum to stick a picture of him and his son to the wall in his cell. And it's a picture that he took from all the pictures that Camila had on everyone. And there's a dope closing shot here of Perry kind of sitting in the darkness in his cell. And you got, again, light streaming through that just kind of creates a harsh contrast visual, but that looks extra lonely with like this little bit of light that allows you to see Perry's kind of just like loneliness and acceptance of these circumstances. And it's just a really nice shot and a great way to close out the season. Moving on to talking about Della. Della opens the episode devastated when faced with the reality that Camila's behind Brooks' murder because she looked up to Camila. And Perry wants to take the info they have to Berger, which forces Della to reveal to everyone that Berger is gay and that Camila has pics of it. After the trial is over, Perry bigs up Della to the press, deservedly so, obviously. And she's asked about being seen with Berger, and she plays coy about her dating life, even as Anita stands by. She says something like, oh, maybe I'll find a husband one day. And I know we all kind of thought, well, I'm not gonna say we all. I kind of thought that Della was gonna be moving toward a place where she was gonna be a little bit more willing to risk being open with her relationship with Anita, but clearly not the case here. We later see all three of them, Anita, Della, and Berger, out to dinner. And Anita seems content pretending, but for now. Like, it looked kind of like I'm okay with this, but I'm close to not being okay with this, because a photographer comes up and wants a picture of the couple, which is Della and Berger in this situation. And like I said, she makes a face that looks like, I'm cool with this for right now. And if we get a third season, I mentioned at the top, this kind of like epilogue portion of the episode, which this scene falls into, kind of setting up third season story arcs. This will be a good one. The secrecy of their relationship being something that Anita is no longer comfortable with. Della later confronts Camila about everything she's done. And Camila kind of lays into her too about being, I think, obtuse or naive about what's necessary for women to get ahead in life in this day and age in LA. Pointing out her active hiding of her relationship as well. So it's kind of like, you do kind of understand a little bit. So don't sit here and be on your high horse to me when you understand enough to hide your relationship, which I thought was an interesting point by her as well. And that's more evidence that secrecy could be an issue for next season if we get one. So really good stuff there. Moving on to Paul. We've seen Paul struggle all season with guilt over how he's treated his own people. So when Perkins offers Paul a job that, again, we're talking about blackmail here. This job that he offers Paul is seemingly to collect evidence of bad, illegal, whatever behavior by these white council people to help get a public pool built in black neighborhoods, just to do something good for the community. And you figure Paul's going to take that job because, again, back to the illusion of justice, right? This is how you get there, working within that system. This is what Paul did with Perkins himself, and now this is what he's going to do for Perkins, which is why he was chosen, is he's going to essentially, I think, gather evidence to blackmail these white councilmen. Well, I was about to say council people or council women, but it's 1930. There's probably no council women. But it's a blackmailing these councilmen into doing what needs to be necessary to, get zoning permits or whatever to build this pool. So interesting direction for Paul's character. And again, continuing to play on the idea of working within the system to achieve justice. In this case, justice being getting something for the black community that white people are pointlessly restricting them from having. I think there's also another example of these characters using blackmail. Wait, I was being redundant. Never mind. I was like, oh, wait, I already said that. Moving on to the Gallardos, and I'm going to close with some thoughts. Mateo agrees to take the 30 years, as he was the trigger man, and the show has very clearly been trying to tell us that Raphael has a bright future ahead of him with his art, so it makes sense that Mateo would take the charge. Mateo reads a nice, heartfelt statement at the trial, apologizing for what he did to the McCutcheon family. And then we later see Raphael at home with his family, painting and planning to visit Mateo. So I think for all intents and purposes, they get a happy ending. Obviously it's not happy for Mateo to be in prison for 30 years, but that is his justice. He did commit that crime. And they actually managed to find a way to give Raphael a future. So it's kind of a win for them. And then lastly, I'm going to close out with some thoughts. Not a long video. Like I said, they wrap this one up and then they kind of set up the next season. Yeah, really, really good episode. But first thought, Camila's skincare routine that we opened this episode with the bee stings, that would be wild in 2023. That is absolute fucking madness in the 1930s. I was wrong. I was wrong about the teacher working for Lydell. But she gotta be one of the thirstiest fucking humans who has ever existed in the history of time. Like, I can't believe she hasn't died of dehydration. Like, how, like, Perry accused her of betraying him. He shows up, tells her he's going to jail for 4 months, and her response is to make a date to go to the park for that 4 months once he gets out of jail. That is a woman who is determined to get some dick from Perry specifically and Perry only. That is a next level bit of thirst. And the last little bit of story wrapping up here. Holcomb burns down the Morocco and we find out that Lydell is hiding out in Japan. He gets a heads up. Hey, the FBI is looking for you. You better stay there. And that's how we end the season. And, again, short video, but I thought this was a great episode, a great ending to the season, a great season. I'm going to put this in my strongest recommendations playlist. It's going to go in my top 10 right now. I don't have a very much of a top 10 at the moment, but it may or may not end up staying by the end of the year, but it's going in there right now. It's at least going to get an honorable mention. It's a simple show about a crime and figuring out who did it and why, and court cases. Simple stuff. I kind of look at it as like a Law and Order episode with enough meat to it that it's now 8 episodes instead of 1 episode. It's like if you got a really good extended Law and Order episode. But really enjoy this show. I enjoyed season 1. Hoping they get a season 3. If they do, I will be here to cover it. I will see you guys then if they do. And until then, peace.